And that is some of the things that I have observed over the years, and this pattern that that kept creeping up, and it kept coming up over and over again. When you have an initiative or a project is introduced in your organization, you already know it's a coin toss, whether that's going to go through or not.
I always like to start these things with a quote, and today I have, "If everyone is moving forward together, then success takes care of itself." Henry Ford. Today with me, I have Cesar Flores. He's the founder and CEO of Coach What Matters. With over 2 decades of experience driving organizational transformation, Cesar has mastered the art of aligning agile practices with long-term business objectives to foster sustainable growth and operational efficiency. Cesar, how are you feeling today?
I'm feeling great, man. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Fantastic. Now, tell me first, student of agility and the agile practices, how did that start, and what does that mean for people that have no idea what that is?
Yeah. So my journey actually began in the early 2000s, late 1990s, when agility and Scrum started coming into the picture, into the environment. This was brand new for everybody. And we were tinkering, is what I would call it, during those times. And agility is as it's described, it's about flexibility. It's about inspecting and adapting. It's also about responding to feedback and getting that feedback directly from your customers, and also cycling that as quickly as possible back into your products. So that is kind of what initially drove me to this Scrum and Agile world and experimenting with it. I did my first complete organizational transformation in 2007. And that is around, the time where even like there was the first Scrum Master certification. And now, of course, we have so many. But that's the first transformation that I participated in. But what drove me is that the ability to adapt to what the customers are telling you, not a fixed point, because business and the marketplace and customers are always evolving, and you have to evolve with them.
Right. When you're starting this in your first experience in that organizational transformation in 2007, the practices and the things that you did then, are they still the same fundamentally, or things have changed in agility and Scrum?
They have changed some. So now a Scrum guide has been updated throughout the years, and that is something that is necessary, right? It's something that it's a living document. It's supposed to be a living document. For me, what I hold dear is the principles, and the principles are always there. And how people interpret them into their organization is where the pros and cons come into play. I think the number one thing that for agility is the focus on the teams, a well-formed team, and what the teams can do. One of the things that I discovered over the transformation of organizations that I did throughout the years, that even as I adapted these techniques, they weren't always aligned to the company's core vision, right? And that is some of the things that I have observed over the years, and this pattern that kept creeping up, and it kept coming up over and over again. There were times where the transformation took place, we would deliver an initiative perfectly, and on paper, everything looked great. The product owners were happy, the customers seemed to love the product, but it did not have a business impact overall. And this pattern is kind of what led me to where I am today. This pattern of, alignment, and some of these tactics and techniques that we'll get into, the spirit of it is a collaborative alignment moment, but how it gets interpreted into the real world with people is where some of the drawbacks happen and some of the things that where people get into trouble.
Now, if someone kind of hears your initial thoughts and your approach, and is like, that sounds interesting, I want to see what that is, and how do you how do you start the conversation with the transformation? Someone is interested, day one, they talk to you, they say, I want to do this. What are the first steps you walk them through?
Yeah, so some of the things that now over two decades of working with transformations of an organization, I always start with the why. Why do you want to go through this transformation? And you get all kinds of different answers. But the main thing where you want to get the leadership, and including the CEO, by the way, into that reasoning and thinking is because you want to measure the success of that transformation. But you don't want to measure that success of the transformation towards what the book says or towards a thought process. You want to measure impact to the business. And that's where I start the conversation. How is this transformation going to impact the core of your business? And does it align with the culture you currently have today? And all those things, all those questions around that, and your core business values, your core vision, and why they want it, and all of that starts to formulate a plan for the transformation. But if a business is doing it because it's the latest thing, or it's a buzzword, or they heard it's neat, or it's cool, it's the wrong reason to do it. It has to align with the trajectory of your business. And that is the most critical thing where the discussion needs to start. The other thing is leadership layers need to be completely aligned. And any misalignment in this causes friction, and a lot of the times people confuse agility or Scrum or these principles and practices to an area of their company. So they go, oh, that's a software development thing, or that's an IT thing, but it doesn't impact me, right? So it doesn't impact my budget process, for example. And that also causes friction, because if you have a year-long budget process, but then you have another practice that wants fluidity, agility, that doesn't align with that budget process, there's friction that happens within an organization. So all of these questions need to be answered at the most senior level, and they need to be invested in that transformation, because it's not just about transforming processes, it's transforming the culture, and that culture needs to align to your vision, your business.
And it feels like you're saying when you start to do this alignment process, it impacts every department. It's not a SaaS and the IT department needs agility because of how fast they're putting out updates, or it's not about the management, how they're managing the people. It's something that is impacting everyone, because at one point, whatever someone might have the most kind of exposure to it, eventually will be touched with another department, because they will need to talk between each other and trying to align the whole company into this new process of agility and Scrum. Now, one of the things that you were mentioning off camera was turning the conventional model upside down to align it with the initial spark. Walk me through what is that and how does that look like?
Yeah, so my observation over the years was that, agility addressed very well the team concept and how teams should organize themselves. And then through a scaled approaches, how that scales to an organization. One of the things that, as I mentioned before, is when people go in, they start selling Agile, or they start selling safe. They start selling a framework. Well, you should never sell it, right? It starts with, how do I make this business better, right? And that's what I mean by turning the model upside down. And that's why we coined this term of coach, what matters? What matters to the business? Start with that core nucleus, that initial spark that fueled the company to be formed, its growth, and how that enabled to deliver value to the customer and to the marketplace. Start there. Once you define what that is, for me, it goes beyond a vision statement, because if you're going to say that you are going to be the number one in anything, you pick a market, like I'm going to be the number one clothing company in the world. Okay, and that's your vision, and that's, well, what value is it that you're going to deliver, right? To do that, I am going to clothe people. What kind of people? And how are you going to measure that, right? So it starts there with that core. And that's what I mean by turning the models upside down. People are so focused on streamlining teams, but what they're not focused on is how they're streamlining their core vision of the business. The team is the last part where all the activity should be like clockwork, because all of the layers in the organization should already be aligned to that core vision and how it's being measured. So that's what I mean about turning it upside down. These tactics and techniques like agility, and we'll get into OKRs and goals and stuff like that. It's about goals or getting at an aspect of it. But if you start with the core of your business, how do you know your business is doing well? And if you ask anybody that, the number one answer, or 99% of the time, will be, here's my revenue numbers, here's my EBITDA, here's my this, here's my that, right? And they're not telling you, because I am delivering this much value to my customer. Here is how I am changing what we do, to deliver more value. And that is always the trap that we get into. This idea that if we start there, then you can look at tactics, practices, and frameworks and go, will this framework help me deliver more value that aligns with my core vision? That's the number one question we need to answer off the top. Now, it could be Agile, it could be OKRs, it could be AI, right?
Yeah.
Will this new tool deliver on my core business value, yes or no? And if you think the answer is yes, how will it do that? And then how will I measure that it's doing that? Because if it's not driving your business value, or it's not helping you grow, get rid of it. It's not for you. It doesn't matter if everybody down the street is doing it. It's not helping your business.
It's that shiny object syndrome, because you sat on 10 meetings and maybe you're in a networking group and you keep hearing what people are saying or doing, and you kind of start with doing those things, and it's just because of the trend. And then you take it, and I'm talking like personal experience. You take it, you try to show it and fit it in somehow in your models and processes, and it doesn't really work. You go back to the drawing board, you try to fit it, but it just doesn't really apply.
That's exactly right. I can't tell you how many times I've heard somebody say, it worked at my last company and we did this, so it should work here, right? And I'm sure everybody can relate to that. But the same people at the last company are not at this company. There's a reason why we have so many, right? There's something unique about every business that needs to be captured, and that we need to have, no matter what it is. And business owners and CEOs need to exploit that particular thing.
What do you say to someone specifically about that unique stuff, that unique thing that makes them that business unique? What do you say to someone that approaches you, that want to do a transformation, but you notice that it's just revenue, it's just money numbers, and everything else will kind of revolve around that. No problem. Whatever you want me to say and do, I'll do it as long as I hit specific revenue and target numbers. What do you say to that person? How do you go about it?
Well, one of the things that I love to do is break down why revenue is more important to them than anything else. And it usually has to do with the problems that they have within the organization, right? There's a deeper root cause to that question, right? And that's what needs to be solved first, right? You can generate revenue by having discounts of your product, but that devalues the product long term if you do that. You can generate more revenue by having more aggressive tactics. You know this if you've ever visited a car lot that's full of cars. It's aggressive tactics. You can increase revenue by that. What you need to do is deliver more value. And the trap that we get into with value is we think that we need to deliver more features or more of something. And I like to use the Arm & Hammer example. They were a company that produced this baking soda, and through education and saw what their customers were doing, and then they marketed that, they educated themselves, produced the same product, but just through education, delivered more value, right? So they spent no more money, no more features, no more anything, same product, delivered more value through education. And that is a perfect example of that. To me, if you're looking for a tactic to increase some sort of number, you need to address first the root cause of that, whatever's causing that number. And then let's revisit the tactic or technique.
I see. It's much clearer, and it's definitely that model of flipping it upside down. When someone says, I got a tactic, I got a strategy, the whole team is on this, all hands on deck, we're all doing this thing. How do you help someone to identify what is a right strategy or what is a right initiative, and how do we make sure that this thing actually goes through and you're successful and has that impact?
Yeah. So this is a great question because, we talked about off camera about numbers, right?
Yeah.
And I have a white paper that I have online also, but around the study between 1995 and 2025. So 30 years of success, right? So this project's, how successful are they? And most of the quotes that you'll see, and the definition of success has changed through that, is 50%. That's almost like the agreed upon number. So when you have an initiative or a project is introduced in your organization, you already know it's a coin toss, whether that's going to go through or not, right? So what you put through that funnel or that success rate better be something that aligns to the core of your business first. And then you need to measure how that will impact your business, right? So you need to have that calculation of how it will and project out. The other thing you need to do is have pivot points. Invest enough to validate your hypothesis, but not enough that you can't back out. That is the key to any initiative that is out there. You need to learn along the way enough to either double down or back out. And that happens in every single stage. And what usually happens is leaders start to get nervous because of budget investments and all that as you invest more and more money into it, or there's delays in the program. There's all kinds of things that happen through an initiative, right? It could be a technical obstacle, a people obstacle, whatever it is, it happens. And so those are the things that you need to watch out for. But if you have that formula in mind and pivot points where you need them in strategic places, and you're measuring against where your core of the business is, you should be in good shape. Don't put anything down that funnel that is not worth your time.
Right. It needs to be, you need to have that clear idea that 50%, like I said, it's a coin toss. 50% might work, or it may not. So if you're going down that path, make sure it's aligned with your core vision, and it will, it's worth it. But also have those pivot points where you can back out and not go too much into that process. I think I was mentioning from personal experience, I know that my team was working on a project and they kept coming back and forth. We're going back and forth, and I'm giving suggestions, and we're changing and we're pivoting. And at one point, I did kind of point out to, this is what we're talking about. I'm like, guys, you're way too invested in something that this is a new process. You want to see how it will work, but you're so invested that if I'm saying let's change this, it is like I can see it in your face. Like, man, like a week of work has gone by. And this is what we were talking about, pivot point. It's not about like changing complete course, but if you have a point where you can see, if this doesn't work out, I can just change this way. And if that doesn't work out, I can. It's not like, hey, we're dedicated, go all the way out, because to be frank and to be real, we're in a point where you're trying and testing and learning. So you're not that good at these things to nail it every single time that you start a project. What are some of, what are those pivot points should look like? Are we talking like a weekly thing? Are we talking about a percentage? Are we talking about check? How does that structure of pivot points would look like?
It depends on the size of the investment, right? And this is where also some tactics and practices don't account for it. The reason why teams aren't allowed to endlessly just iterate is because there's a budget constraint. And the people that own the budget are not at the team level, right? They're usually at the higher level. So for me, it starts with them, the people that hold the power of the budget to what they want to see in those results. And the amount of investment should be equally to the amount of the pivot, and how long. And it should be learnings along the way. It's not about how much money we've spent.
Right.
That is just part of it. How much have we learned? Right. So those two are the main things that need to happen in that equation. How much have we learned versus how much we've spent? And that along the way will inform you, and the other things come into play are secondary to me, like, are we on time? Are we on budget? And all these other things. But how much have we learned thus far? And that is something that is rarely seen in these projects, because people have not built enough to get feedback from the target customer. Usually they'll say something like, well, it'll take me 6 weeks to even assemble the team, and then another 6 weeks to get the development environment going, or something like that. And then all of a sudden you're talking 6 months and your budget is gone without learning a thing other than you've put a team together and you have the structure to build code, right? So these are the things that get businesses in trouble. We need to understand that the value is in the hands of the customer, not internally. Not the value belongs to them, and their willingness to pay for that product shows you what the value is. That's the part of the equation into it. Coffee became more valuable when Starbucks got into the picture, right? All of a sudden, your cup of coffee went up. Did the formula change? Is it better coffee? No, like the black coffee is black coffee, but they added a bunch of stuff to it. And they also added an experience to it, right? And that made it more valuable to it. But now you look at it many years later, I can't go get a 75-cent cup of coffee anymore, even at the gas station, right? So now they've increased the value of the coffee and the willingness to pay, because the willingness to pay is there, right? And that is the what we need to pay attention to. You will not learn any of that if you're just building environments and building code. You need to, these pivot points need to include what have we learned and what will we learn when. So that I may want, as you know, and I've sat at the executive chair where I want to say, I want to see how much we've learned and what are we going to learn by next check-in. And if that needs to be monthly, because it's moving quicker, you know, in the marketplace or whatever it is, maybe it's monthly. But if it's moving really quick and I want to double down on my investment because we're learning a lot here, maybe it's every other week. And I want more on that. You know, give me more of that. Let's invest more money into that.
Now, there's I think there has been more of a discussion around willingness to pay and pricing with more of the talks that Alex Hermosa has been doing about pricing, where he's like, I can just increase the volume by doubling the price and let's just go from there. You will see how it goes. Don't sell in the medium market, sell in the low or the high, because this is the value of death. You should sell very low or very high. In the middle, no one appreciates or values your service. You've been doing this practically with companies that are growing, companies that are aligning, going through transformation and seeing the outcomes. How do you feel about pricing and willingness to pay?
You have to test your marketplace, right? And you have to find the spot of where you fit in. And testing is part of it. You know, there's many examples of that with with Nissan and how they first started and all those other things. Toyota did the same thing with the introduction of luxury brands and all these other things. But you need to test your market, right? And the things that they're doing. And that's what I mean by the learnings that you're getting back. If all of the perfect company to study is actually the De Beers company with diamonds, right? You know, they have this thing where they control the amount of diamonds that are out in the marketplace. The reason they're doing that is not because there's a shortage. It's because they want to hold on to the value, and they increase the value through inventory, basically, right? So that is a strategy that is put into play. If you were to see how a Louis Vuitton bag is made, and somebody was to post a video of how it's made, and you saw it lined up against 10 million other Louis Vuitton bags, automatically you would be devaluing that product. Yeah. That's why you'll never see that, you know, in a YouTube or whatever. The scarcity of that product is what makes it valuable. And we see it all the time. So this test needs to happen as to how your strategy goes into play. But you also have to be careful with that. The customers are smart enough to understand if they're being played. You always need to deliver in good faith, good value, right? And you want raving fans. You want fans that know that you put quality into your product, are willing to pay a little extra, especially if it aligns with their principles. Patagonia is a perfect example of that. Another company that, you know, invest in how they produce their product, and their fan base is willing to pay a little extra because of the extra steps they do. And they're transparent about the steps that they do, how they're measuring against their vision and all the things that are happening.
It's very obvious when you think about it with the scarcity and how that is controlled, or when you have the example of Patagonia, and I think people get lost into just looking at the numbers as opposed to stop thinking about the numbers for a second and look at the value and look at the alignment that you want in your company, and what are you standing for? What is the value you're delivering to your customers? That will drive the willingness to pay, as opposed to doing calculations of profit losses and cash flows. Because like you mentioned, even in a couple of minutes ago, why is the revenue so important? There has to be another pressure point that you're just using revenue or profitability to solve the problem. Is that it?
Yeah, that's exactly it. I think to me, revenue is the ultimate bear trap. Everybody gets caught up in it. Everybody gets trapped into that revenue discussion, and it happens to every entrepreneur, CEO. If you're in board meetings, one of the things, my first slide in a board meeting was around revenue. It's a trap. And the reason why I say it's a trap is because what you need to focus for long term is the trajectory of the value that you're delivering. And now I'm not saying that revenue is irrelevant, not at all, right? You need it actually to operate a business and all of that. What I am saying is if you consistently deliver value and continue to increase value to your customers, the revenue automatically follows. That is exactly what I'm saying, right? So yes, you do need revenue, but short-term tactics to improve revenue 90% of the time hurt you long-term. I mentioned sales. I mentioned things where you pull aggressive tactics.
Yeah.
I mentioned all these other games that we play in the marketplace in order to increase revenue. Ultimately, the people that judge you are your customers, and you want to continue to satisfy them in good times, in bad times, all of that. And your trajectory, and the reason why people don't like that discussion is because it's a little bit of a slow burn. Mm-hmm. Value is not as glitzy as money in your pocket, right? But I make the argument that you can deliver value without making money, right? So, and that is what's unique. People think that revenue equates to value automatically, and it doesn't. You can generate revenue short term and devalue your product, right? As we've discussed. But you can also deliver value by not making any money. If I donate my time to a soup kitchen, I make no money, but I delivered a lot of value to the people that are being fed, right? And to me, those are the opposite ends of that equation, right? And people need to think about. So a lot of the times when companies are strategizing around value, they are talking within their walls. And what they should be talking about is to their customers, but not confuse value with volume of feature delivery. That's the other thing. We talked about the Arm & Hammer example, right? They discovered that their customers were using this product in various ways. Wow, that's value, right? So it's not always about more features. It's paying attention. And if you follow that value journey, it will lead you to the right places and revenue will come.
Right. Now, if you have a clear, let's say you're on the right path. Let's say you got this. It's clear that you're focusing on delivering the value, and you want not to go in the trap of high volume of features. You want to do the right thing. What you were mentioning about Agile is that you believe in OKRs and SMART goals, and that is the way that you kind of go about it. What is the way that you set up OKRs and SMART goals?
The way that I do it is strictly aligned to the core executive vision that a company has. And it starts there because that's what we were talking about, turning the model upside down. The foundation of your vision should live there. And that why that comes out of that foundation should be enough to galvanize your teams and establish those goals. It should be enough. If that why isn't strong enough, or you need to, have a pep rally for it, because you that means you need to go back to the drawing board. It needs to resonate with your culture, with every person in there, so that as you roll out OKRs, that executive leadership team also does the same thing, and the next level does the same thing, and so on. And there should be a traceability between that team OKR and the business impact. And if there's not, you haven't done it the right way. But what tends to happen with any tactic, right, in the spirit of OKRs is amazing. You want to focus on the outcome. And I always tie outcome to some form of value that is being there. But sometimes it gets misconstrued with the amount of things you're going to get done, right? I am going to finish 9 out of 10 features this quarter. That's not an OKR, right? So that's what tends to happen, is the degrading of the spirit of the tactic over time that happens in these organizations, partly because they are not measuring the business impact, and I tend to be pretty ruthless when I go in and coach an engagement, and I say, what is that person and how are they impacting your bottom line? And usually they start to tell me what the role of that person is, right? And I say, well, if you're a person that is coding, right, that an engineer that codes, that's what they're doing. They're delivering features and all of that. And I say, no, they're delivering an experience, or they're creating an experience that will drive value. How are you tying what the person is building, that experience, to the value that you're delivering to your company? And OKR should work exactly the same way, right? The other thing that needs to happen in these companies when you roll out, especially like between OKRs and SMART goals and things like this, is psychological safety. OKRs by nature and in the spirit of them tend to be a little bit aspirational in nature. Mm-hmm. But if I'm afraid of my score of the OKR, you don't have psychological safety in your organization. Or if you're not willing to learn, right? And we play word games. We say, well, we didn't fail, we learned. Is that really resonating within your organization? We talked about pivot points. If we go down a path and we decide that that's not a good idea and we need to pivot, that should be equally celebrated as the moment that we did go all the way and that made a business impact. To me, it's the same thing. There should be no difference between the two, but that also creates psychological safety, so that when I have a goal or an OKR that hasn't been met, I either was successful or I learned something. But a lot of the times, because we're focused, some OKRs in some places turn into like a to-do list. All we're saying is you didn't do these things and we didn't learn anything. Equally as bad, like those to me is the bad kind of approach, and how the spirit of the OKR gets degraded over time in organizations.
It's very true, because when I was introduced by OKRs, I feel like it worked out for the best now. But when I was introduced, it was like, oh, this is what Google does. This is how these massive companies do OKRs. They don't just focus on the KPIs. They need to be like specific, measurable, and you can track progress. Which I was like, oh, I can track progress. I like that one. And you're absolutely right. In the beginning, my first mistake, they were very, let's call aspirational. They were not specific. Like, make this better. That was a typical thing. Or improve this, or increase. Like, it was not a specific thing. And then the second iteration of that was like a to-do list. Okay, so now we have these, and how fast it takes you to complete a set of things, or finish a build or a project or something that we are, or hit a goal, how close we are. It's just like a measuring basically the percentage of how close we are. It wasn't in the spirit of the OKR. It took me quite some time to get to the place where we have our annual goal, a quarterly goal, and OKRs attached, and everything starts to make sense. And if it doesn't tie into this and it's a pet project, label it as a pet project, and we know what we're doing. We're not doing OKRs. We're doing something you like in your free time, or something that would be very beneficial. If you look at OKRs, and if you look at let's say the POS system or eMyth and SOPs, would you say they're somewhat related, different versions, iterations, that someone can create whatever works the best for their company? Or do you feel like, look, you shouldn't be mixing that up because it will start to confuse, it will not work to kind of put whatever works from here and whatever works from here and cocktail some sort of a unique solution for you?
Yeah, the spirit of the disciplines need to align. And the more variation you have within that alignment, the more friction it causes. And that is the issue. We started talking about agility. That is the issue with, well, finance is going to do it this way and this other team is going to do it this other way. You are automatically introducing unknown friction and needless discussions. And this is why I say, like, how is this going to make your business better? It's not how it's going to make your department better, right? It's how it's going to make your business better. So these are the things that need to be discussed, and the interplay between areas needs to be seamless. The amount of time that organizations spend organizing between divisions, departments, and in teams, it's literally dead time. It's no value time. And you as a leader in your organization need to eliminate that. If you have a strong leaders, because as leaders mature in their career path, the reason that they are is they're convicted. They're motivated individuals, usually win at all costs kind of things, and do things that they're strong-minded. They're very good at what they do. Well, usually they do that for their area, right? And then that multiplies itself for every area, right? And that causes friction. And a good leadership team looks at the ecosystem of the organization and ensures that everything plays well together. And the first time somebody says something like, well, that's not going to work well with our budget process, for example, that is the stopping point to get on the whiteboard and figure that out. Don't let the teams figure it out. Don't give yourself an out, and don't let the next layer figure that out. As a leadership team, that is what you're there to do, is to provide the guardrails for that all these teams work together, because it's about what's best for the business, not what's best for a department or an area or anything like that.
It's a very good approach, because I think people do compartmentalize. They feel like, this is my department. Hey, if you do this, there will be impact, which I don't know how it'll work out for the whole, because people don't like change. We really struggle with change, but I think good leaders, they are sometimes too ambitious, and they're willing to go through the grid and to understand and be transformed at the end of it. Sometimes some people are very analytical and very good at a specific department, and it's hard to get them on the same page. And I like the approach that you said. It's at that point you stop and you go to the drawing board and you solve it for the team, with the team. Don't just dump it on them and be like, go ahead, the two of you hash it out in the boardroom, and then we'll come up with whatever you do. It's more of a, I need to resolve this, make sure everything is good and the team is aligned and they're happy to continue and using that whole new process.
Absolutely.
We have fantastic discussions around these things, and I think it's very clear how you see a company kind of go through this transformational experience, and why starting it at the end, like at the beginning, like why starting it. It feels like a full circle, like you're embodying everything and you're doing it for the right reasons. You have clear goals and clear directions where to go and what you want to tackle and how to tackle it and how to keep going. And Cesar, if someone likes all the stuff that you said and is intrigued, how did they get a hold of you to work with you and to talk with you?
Yeah, definitely go to our website, coachwhatmatters.com. We're there. We're available. We're also on Instagram, Coach What Matters. We're on LinkedIn, Coach What Matters. Reach out to us. We're happy to talk to you. We're complimentary 60-minute conversation just to talk to you. And if what we're looking for is partners for the long term. We are not a consulting agency that wants to drop a PowerPoint on your desk and walk out. We want to be in this journey with you. We are motivated to help your business grow and also for your employees and your culture to thrive. We're not in there to drop our model or drop our blueprint and walk out. To this day, I check in on everybody to make sure every customer that we have, every quarter to understand how they're doing anything free of charge. We don't charge for those checks. Just checking to make sure everything's good, seeing how you're doing. We want long-term partners in this endeavor. So reach out to us. But if people have made it this far into our podcast, I want to let you in on a little secret because you brought up Google. Their lifetime OKR, unofficially score as a company, is 0.61. So think about how successful they have been and that score. It's to everybody that's out there thinking that they have to get a 9 or a 10 or however you're scoring it. Think about that score. It's unofficial, of course. Because I don't work for Google and I never have, but I do have inside information. 0.61 lifetime.
Cesar, this is turning the conventional model upside down. Thank you so much for the time. I wish you all the success and we should do this again.
Thank you so much, man. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.